For more on this, we're joined by Bradley Tusk, founder and CEO of Tusk Ventures. Bradley, good morning. Which companies do you think are most concerned about Washington's new power dynamic?
Well, certainly Facebook and Twitter, because they're facing a whole wide variety of different regulatory challenges and problems. Google, because they're already under federal antitrust prosecution. I think Amazon as well.
Is there a reason to believe that Amazon or Facebook might actually be broken up within the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think less so Amazon than Facebook, simply because with Facebook, one, they're already facing antitrust prosecution. That's already underway. Two, you can see how to break Facebook up in a pretty logical way, where Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook become three separate companies. I guess AWS and Amazon proper could also split up the same way. But if you had to bet on one of those two, you'd bet on Facebook to break up.
I just want to quickly recap what Section 230 is for our viewers, otherwise known as the Communications and Decency Act. It basically protects internet companies from being responsible for what users post, allowing them to moderate the content on their own platform in good faith without government oversight. And Bradley, I know you've already told us this law does not stand a chance of remaining unchanged. No. How so? Do you think it's just going to be clarified? Do you think it will be repealed altogether? What will this law look like?
So, normally you would say that the odds of legislation on anything passing are so low that it would be more clarified through rulemaking, which doesn't require going through Congress. But in this particular case, I think both parties are so dislike Facebook and Twitter, are so convinced that the platforms are biased against them. And obviously, we're so personally impacted on what happened on January 6th. When you put all that together, I think you're going to have overwhelming support from both sides to change it. And what that really means is changing the entire way that the platforms do business. Because right now, the goal is to get as much controversy as possible on as many issues as possible, because that drives eyeballs, that drives clicks, and that drives advertising revenue. If all of a sudden you can be sued for the content of what your users post, you've got to moderate the platform completely differently, which means your whole business model can't just be based around volume and controversy.
One of the criticisms of potentially changing 230 is that it would actually hurt smaller tech companies who don't have the funding and the legal means to basically defend themselves against what somebody posts on their site. Is there anything to that? Are you concerned at all about these smaller companies?
I don't think so. First of all, I think that's the kind of thing that big companies say when they want to protect themselves from regulation and change, is that they somehow try to change the subject and make it seem like they're looking out for the little guy. Facebook or Amazon is never looking out for the little guy. Second, as a venture capitalist, I invest in seed and Series A companies. I mean, that's my business. And we never are able to put money into a platform that's like Facebook or Amazon or Twitter or anything else, simply because they're so anti-competitive and they have so much market power that think you can compete with them is completely unrealistic. If Section 230 were to be repealed, I think that could change.
As a tech investor, what industries and innovations are you watching as we enter this new political era?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one I'm sure everyone says is climate. And I think specifically the thing that's most interesting is carbon capture. And is that something that with a lot of federal funding and a lot of R&D money and a lot of tax incentives could really be spurred along quickly? Second would be healthcare, and specifically telehealth, digital health. One of the lessons, one of the few positive things, I guess, from COVID is that people learn that digital health actually works really well. And it is a way to both provide more care and cheaper care to a lot more people. And so I think you'll see the Biden administration embrace that. But the third, and I knew this question was coming, and I wanted to have one that was counterintuitive, is defense tech. In that, I think there's now this narrative of, oh, the Democrats are in charge. It will be totally bad for business. And every kind of left-wing priority now will all of a sudden shoot to the forefront. Joe Biden's been in Washington for 47 years. He's always been a moderate. He lived through the Cold War. I don't think that he's so quickly, walking away from our military. And so I think that, people who have advances on the drone side or other types of intelligence are still going to have a really receptive customer in the U.S. military.
Very interesting. I like it. What do you make of just the pressure that's been put on companies and also business leaders to speak out politically and about social issues?
Yeah, I mean, look, I still think that the vast majority of the time, CEOs and executives look at their job as how do we maximize profits for ourselves and for our shareholders. And when they speak out about an issue, it's because the pressure to not do so will create more business harm, and remaining silent creates business good. I think that's why Facebook and Twitter ultimately did their bans against Trump. And I think that's true on most issues. Occasionally, you may have a CEO, for example, that really does believe deeply in an issue and puts himself or herself out there purely because they care about it. But you take like Tim Cook and privacy, I believe that he cares about privacy, but also if you're Apple, being branded as the pro-privacy company is great for iPhone sales and great for iPad sales and great to help push back against other negative narratives about your company. And so I think you've got to look at these with a little bit of cynicism and grain of salt and see what's really motivating the statements before you accept them at face value.
You mentioned Twitter banning President Trump. Do you think that that was the right decision? Do you think that they should have done that sooner? Do you think that they should let him back on? What do you make of that?
I think that it was literally Twitter, in my view, is they're not anti-conservative, they're not anti-liberal, they're not anything. They are a company that's trying to make as much money as possible, and that's it. So they kept Trump on the platform for as long as they possibly could because he drove a ton of eyeballs and a ton of clicks. In fact, their market cap dropped by $5 billion the day after they banned him. So for 99.8% of the Trump presidency, they kept him on the platform. And then finally, after the riots and the insurrection, the point hit where between pressure from their employees, from their customers, and far most importantly from their advertisers, who were getting their own pressure, mounted to the point where all of a sudden cutting him loose was a smart business decision. And so I don't think ideology or politics played a role in what any of these companies did, whether it's Amazon and Apple not working with Parler or Google and Facebook and Instagram banning Trump or anything else. I think it's purely dollars and cents.
All right, Bradley Tusk, founder and CEO of Tusk Ventures. Great to have you on. Appreciate it.